This is Rating Descending,
where we watch IMDb's Worst 250 so you don't have to.
My name is Abigail Ward.
And I'm Michelle St. Clair.
And tonight we watched Ultraviolet. A beautiful hemophage infected with a virus that gives her superhuman powers has to protect a boy in a futuristic world who is thought to be carrying antigens that would destroy all hemophages. Let's watch.
We have a guest this episode. He's the director of Red Curtain Hell and the host of the Mighty Motion Picture Rangers podcast. Longtime friend of the podcast, Shane Anderson.
Yow!
Hello, hello.
Yow!
Hello, hello.
Shane, shush. Ow!
It's not yet. Not yet.
Shut
Okay.
up.
Just
Get back in that closet.
but a moment.
All right, now, come on,
now.
Shane, hurry up.
Okay.
Oh, we've lost time.
Welcome.
Sorry,
Oh, thank you very much.
we've run out of time. I'm sorry. Thanks,
Sorry.
Shane. Thanks for
Yeah.
your time tonight.
All right, that was great. Bad movies.
Great guy.
Yeah.
IMDb smoothies. So I'm a Brisbane-based filmmaker and sometime podcaster, although the podcast is now sort of ended, but I am working on something new
Hey.
about TV shows this time around because I think it'll be interesting.
Ooh. Do you want to just plug that podcast again? Why don't you?
The Mighty Motion Picture Rangers, as far as puns go, that was the best I could do.
No, I love it.
Yeah.
That's a great pun.
Oh, good. I thought I came up with the name and then thought of everything else after that. So sort of like snakes on a plane, you know, that strategy of creativity. But I mainly do filmmaking, and I like filmmaking. I podcast because it's cheaper than making movies.
It's certainly more financially accessible, which is why we're doing it for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Well, it's the new trend, isn't it? Everything is being made into a podcast first and then being adapted into a TV show.
I've actually heard about that. Someone at my master's course said that they had an idea for a TV show, so they were going to make it a podcast so they could easily pitch the TV show because it's based on a podcast.
It's so it can be based on IP.
Yeah.
Certain institutions in Australia that shall not be named out loud, their strategy now is to fund podcasts to then be made into TV shows. That's their business strategy.
Where's the webpage where they fund podcasts? Can you send it to me?
There's no webpage. It's still the same system where you have to know someone and then they'll.
The classic in the film industry,
Yeah.
in that you'll only make it if you know the right people at the right time. It's very
Correct.
It's a very
Correct.
fun game to play.
But you can tell that that's our strategy. Like, that's why we've been, like, fleshing out the lore of Rating Descending. We've got the IMDb boss baby. We have the, like, portal, I'm trapped in a poster. You know, we're slowly... now you're introduced into the RDCU, the Rating Descending Cinematic Universe. Or I guess it should be the podcast universe as it stands.
Well, cinema is the next thing. It'll be adapted and
Yeah.
then you'll be set.
Exactly. We'll all cameo in the background as, I don't know, someone going, hey, who needs help over there? As like someone's, I don't know, it'll be turned into a superhero.
We really have fleshed out the lore of IMDb so thoroughly, we could write a whole film about IMDb and the boss baby that
Right.
needs to be defeated.
Well,
Yeah.
funny you should mention it because I was like a hardcore IMDb user in my teen years.
That doesn't surprise
And
me
I was
one
actually-
bit.
I was very, very worried that when you did the Ultraviolet episode, because I used to write impassioned reviews of films that people didn't like. And I have one of Ultraviolet. I did one, but I tried looking for it and I couldn't find it. So I don't think it exists anymore. I don't know because I was there for ages and then they had the big reboot of IMDb and took down message boards and things like that. I was mainly on the message boards. I was an IMDb message boards boy. And
The classic stereotype.
I wrote impassioned defenses of Ultraviolet and wrote vitriolic diatribes about how much I did not like District 9. So
You didn't like District 9? Who are you?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Hey, guys, guest cancelled.
look, all of the problems I had with District 9 are things that everyone said was about Elysium and then the other one that he followed it up with. So I feel like I was just preempting
I see.
the future problem.
Okay,
You were ahead of the
alright.
curve.
That makes more sense,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
have to say, this is a bad start. I've taken an immense dislike to you.
Oh, no.
And you have to spend the rest of the episode making it up to
Oh,
me through various
right.
acts of kind words and service.
Right. If I burp, will that
Oh,
put me
yeah,
on your
100%. Let's time it, though. So, like, you warn me when it's happening. We'll make sure we sync it up for Michelle.
But you also directed Red Curtain Hell, which I always thought was
did.
yeah, that like it's got a lot of neat ideas in it. It's got that rad pseudo one shot for the opening like 22 minutes.
Wait, did you watch it?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! Did you tell me you bought that? Or?
No, I was just being a good friend.
Oh my goodness! Oh, you are too kind. It is a very rough around the edges film.
We've all made something that we look back at
This
and go,
is a rough
I
around
could
the-
do better now.
This is a Rough Around the Edges podcast.
Yeah.
So who are we to...
I had the directorial strategy of throwing a lot of things at the wall, and not a lot of it sticks, but some things do. There are some things I was very, very. There's a match cut towards the end that I was very, very proud of, and a Dutch tilt dolly moment that I was like, I like this. This is my favorite bit.
I literally said to Brooke that the Dutch tilt dolly, I was telling her about it because she didn't watch it with me. I was like, there was this one fucking bit in the third act. It was incredible. Such a great shot. I was like, this kid's got ideas.
Yeah, it's a little, for anyone who doesn't know, it's a film about a really shitty production of Hamlet going horribly, horribly wrong. And, you know, there's an asshole director and asshole actors and egomania and community theatre. If anyone's done community theatre, you would know exactly this world. And then they cannibalize each other metaphorically and maybe not so metaphorically. So
No, I really enjoyed
Oh, thank
it.
you.
It's the exact sort of
thank you
like
so much.
little indie production where, like, as you said, you can see like the seams around the edges, but then you also know about like the process of making it, the big ideas involved for the budget there is, and you're like, this has a lot put into it. Like, it's clearly made with a lot of thought and process.
My favorite filmmaker, Guillermo del Toro, his philosophy is your ambition should always exceed your budget. So I'm like, you know what? I want to do a micro budget feature, and I want 24 speaking characters, and I want a 22-minute opening shot, and I want this, and I want everyone to die by the end of the movie. And it's still one of my favorite things, like favorite experiences. Not my favorite piece of my own work, but it's my favorite experience I've had. It
That's
felt
amazing.
cool. It
I
was
want to
really
watch
cool.
it. I'm going to do my research on you, Mr. Shane Anderson.
I mean, I'm a big believer in like, in especially in Australia, but in this industry, you should support each other's work and actually watch and pay for it.
100%.
100%. 100%. Even if I'm like maybe somewhat, because I'm very adamant that Australian films shouldn't just be about people in houses being sad for 2 hours. People be in the outback being sad for 2 hours.
Or if you're lucky, it's a combination of both. You know, they wander
Combination
in and
of both,
out.
and there's a dead child or a dead raped child, and they just sort of, and there's a mildly racist cop who's an alcoholic, has to investigate
Hey,
it.
don't forget the domestic violence.
Yeah, and also don't forget,
but only as plot device.
Yeah, and you can't forget that someone has to return to their small town and revisit trauma that they've
Yeah.
tried to escape from for 20 years.
I don't.
Oh, you saw that movie too. Despite all of these complaints I have, I go into the cinemas and I see, and especially the micro budget stuff, even if I'm sort of critical about ones that sort of still fall into those tropes, I buy the DVD, I buy it online, I contribute to the Kickstarter campaigns, I go to their screenings and their fundraisers and all those kind of things, because you put your money where your mouth is. I try and watch a minimum of 5 movies a week. You know,
Oh
that's
my
my
God.
usual goal.
You're rigorous. You know, like the French New Wave director Truffaut, he was like, I watch 3 new films a day. And I was like, fuck off, all right? I barely have
Who
time
has the time?
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah,
the standards.
That just
You're
tells me that
bad.
he comes from money.
Yeah, that's true.
Bong Joon-ho wakes up extra early to watch one movie a day. So he wakes up at 5 a.m. to watch one movie a day.
I like that.
I include short films in this. So like I can, if I've got a busy day, I'll put on a 3-minute short film and, you know, and that
Yeah.
and Bob Junker, or I'll watch no movies and then I'll watch like 3 in one day. and then, all good. So
Well, if you count podcasts, I certainly listen to at least 3 to 5 podcasts a day.
If you count episodes of Cosmos with Carl Sagan, I've definitely been watching a lot of movies recently.
Hey, we watch at least one movie a week,
And I've always got movies playing right in here.
That's
right.
the audience can't see you do that.
Oh, I was pointing at my noggin. Shane, I'm so excited that you love Ultraviolet so much. You're the perfect guest this week.
Well, caveat, I loved it. Watching it again, I reevaluated a little bit, but I am still a defender of this film.
Interesting. Okay, so me and Michelle watched this film for the first time years ago.
Oh, I watched it. I showed
really?
it to you.
Yeah, you did. And we adored it. It is the perfect bad film to sink drinks to.
Yeah.
But rewatching it today was painful. And but I was absolutely enamored at the same time. What was if you were a fan and you've had a reevaluation, I would love to know what that is. Just to give us a rundown of that.
I watched this when I was 14, and I had, at that time, my favorite film was X-Men 3, Don't Judge. And I was working in a video store, and Ultraviolet came out, and I was enamored first by the trailer. It has a really compelling trailer to me.
Watching it is like watching a trailer for it.
It's one long trailer.
Yeah. And I still am. I'm very big on aesthetics in film as opposed to plot. I think plot is not the most important thing in a film. I think in the same way that, like, if you have your favorite song of all time and you took all the lyrics out, you still have music. And I think it's the same thing with film. If you have a movie and you take out all plot and dialogue, you still have cinema. But if you because a lot of movies these days, they're videotaped theater. It's 2 shots and over the shoulders, and it's like you hose it down with coverage and you cut it in the edit, and the camera looks at whatever is needed to see in the film. And I miss bold visual choices, and Ultraviolet is nothing if not a lot of visual choices strung back one after the other.
That's so interesting, because I'm the complete opposite in that I am plot hungry. I am like a fiend for good structure. I want something to be well told. I'm there purely for the story, and the aesthetics come second for me in a way. In that, like, I could watch.
How does that come for you with? Oh, sorry.
Oh no, yeah.
I was going to say, how does that come for you with something like David Lynch, where then plot kind of is definitely pushed to the side in favor of an experiential kind of thing?
I'm not a big David Lynch fan. Like, I need the plot
Fair
and
enough.
the structure to be tight for me to fully enjoy it. I don't want anything to
Right.
dwindle too much, and I need plot to be that number one. Like, it's the number one in my hierarchy, and then the any good aesthetics is like a bonus to that. I can watch a very visually drab film.
I think I lean more into the Shane camp as someone who has said to my students as a film teacher repeatedly, no one cares about the words.
Well, my philosophy has always been, if you wrote a list of all the things you liked about a movie, the performance was fantastic, the plot, the dialogue was sizzling, and you gave it that list to someone who'd never heard of this thing before, if they can't tell if you're talking about a play or a movie, have you made a good movie?
Yeah.
Because, and why then is cinema the medium of the story? Why not a play? Because plays are electrifying. When a great play seen live is electrifying. It's wonderful. Or a novel, a great novel can do things film could never imagine to do. Now, to bring it back to Ultraviolet, you don't have to be, full in your face in terms of the visuals. I think people like I don't know if you've seen Marielle Heller's films, or
No.
So she did Can You Ever Forgive Me? And she did A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, the Tom Hanks, Mr.
Stop
Rogers
putting
film.
us to shame here, Shane.
I have
Alright?
heard of that one. I didn't watch it.
If you want, like, and she to me is sort of the successor to the Mike Nichols kind of aesthetic, because Mike Nichols
right,
isn't
yeah.
like Brian De Palma where he throws visuals at you, but he's still using the camera very. You've seen The Birdcage?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's using that camera. It's just very understated, and that's just that's a volume level as opposed to a lack of style. So it doesn't have to be Ultraviolet where you're.
Yeah.
Everything has to be
doing
on the ultraviolet level, where it's an incredible array of colors and movement and really long,
Right.
like setup of tension and suspense that ultimately leads to a very quick battle where
Yeah.
everyone gets gunned down.
And I think so. The way I reevaluated to get off the tangent, the way I reevaluated Ultraviolet was, I as an adult realized how inelegant it all is, because I like all the individual things. I think it's a really interesting world. I actually like this take on vampires, I think, is way more compelling than it ought to be. And it's just very inelegant. All of it's inelegant. The exposition is just dumped whenever necessary, and every fight scene is like at 11 and doesn't oscillate, levels of tension and stuff like that. But those all I pick in. But the same thing, I watch the movie and I'm like, you know what? I still like these things.
It's like a constellation of genuinely interesting ideas that is swirling within a black hole of cinema abyss. Like, it's an absolute maelstrom nightmare to watch.
That's what's so confusing about it. There's like elements of it that I really enjoy and really like. There's like the premise itself, I think, like the universe that it's set in. I'm like, these are interesting concepts, and visually it is still really striking to watch. I really liked some of the shots and like some of the colors that they use.
Yeah.
But it's just such an unforgivable film. It doesn't matter.
She starts, the first words in the film is a narration of her saying, I come from a world that you might not understand.
She says
and I'm
that
like, yes,
twice.
correct. Absolutely.
And she's like I said, I come from a world you might not understand.
You nailed it.
We get it, Violet.
You totally nailed it. You never explained it.
I think what I dig about it is it leans into formalism in a way that everything is hyper unreal. Like, I'm a huge fan of Speed Racer and the Wachowskis. I love how formalist they are. The downside is that this time around I decided to watch some of the behind the scenes and listen to a bit of Mila Jovovich's commentary, and they were all convinced they were making something very realistic. Which changed my perspective just a smidge, because I'm like, because if you're going for like that 300 aesthetic, like it or not, it's a choice. Like, it's a choice that you can respect even if you don't like it. And I'm like, oh no, they were going for realism, and but like for some reason the entire of Ultraviolet is ubiquitous in its unrealism, that it felt like a deliberate choice when it was just an accident.
When watching it today, I was like, the concepts they're playing with aren't actually that much. It's only like one or two steps more wild than The Matrix, and yet it's on the complete opposite side of the quality spectrum.
Watching it, I was very struck by, now having seen other films in between when I was 14 and now, it's basically very clearly the love child of Run Lola Run and The Matrix.
Yeah.
Because that music, even that dun 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 music is like, I was just like, this is Run Lola Run. This is 100% Run Lola Run, but she's dragging a child along with her instead of just running herself.
Yeah, 100%. I do have to say, before I launch into just the overview, just to give the listeners some like idea of the mayhem of this plot, I also wanted to point out that there's a couple of things in the film that were, the world is in a dystopian universe where essentially like pandemic means that people were infected by blood and they could turn into hemophages. And watching people walk around with face masks, I was like, oh boy, like I don't think when I last watched this didn't resonate quite so much.
Last time we watched this was 2019 and the context has changed. And I'm sure last time I watched it, I was like, it's weird that some people are wearing masks and some people are not. No, they nailed it. Totally nailed it.
When she's about to sort of let him go and she's like, you should put your mask up. I'm like, oh, I feel this. I feel this so much.
Yeah, 100%. I want to make a disclaimer here, by the way. This overview was a nightmare for me. I had a temper tantrum halfway through because I couldn't really make sense of the plot. I closed my laptop, took a drive, and then had to finish it off, and it's still nonsense. So everyone has to bear with me here.
I love the concept that you had a temper tantrum, like having to actually explain this movie cohesively to someone else.
Yeah, I was like, this is nonsense to me. How will it make sense to any of our listeners? But just a bit of general information about this film. As you guys are aware, this was made in 2006. It has 4.4 stars on IMDb.
This is our fourth 2006 movie in a row.
This is an odd string.
Yeah.
This is wild. It was directed...
2006?
Yeah, 2006. It actually feels like it's more towards like the 1999, 2000. I think it's somehow behind its time.
Yeah.
It was directed and written by Kurt Wimmer. And Kurt Wimmer also wrote, he's written quite a lot of films. He did...
Equilibrium.
Yeah, and he also wrote Salt, which is interesting. That's a film that I'm quite familiar with. Yeah, but
I don't mind that film.
Yeah, I mean, I'll get into Kurt Wimmer later because... there was a lot of interesting stuff about him in this film.
Even though this is your episode, I already know a lot about this movie because of both liking it as a teenager and being obsessed with it as a bad movie.
Also, a disclaimer: Michelle really loves Ultraviolet and was devastated that it couldn't be her episode. So I'm sorry. I hope I can do as much for this film as you would have.
Thank you.
This is for you, Michelle. Yeah. This is just some backstory that is given to us as exposition in the opening monologue by Violet. It's 2078. A global pandemic has caused hemophages, infected humans who exhibit vampire-like symptoms and superhuman physical abilities that also die within 12 years after being infected. The Archministry, a militant medical group headed by Vice Cardinal Ferdinand Daxus, what a mouthful.
Why is he vice? Anyway, we'll get into it.
We'll get into that. Has taken control of the government and begun exterminating hemophages in order to contain the virus. That's just the backstory we get in like the first 2 minutes, all right? We're all up to date? We get it? Okay.
Yeah.
Here's where the story starts. Hemophage Violet Song Jat Sheriff, yes, that's her full name, completely unnecessary to have that information, fights to protect the hemophages from the government. Working with the resistance, Violet steals a weapon designed to exterminate all hemophages, only to discover that it is a boy named Six. Rather than kill the child, Violet flees with him, believing that a cure for the disease can be reverse engineered before he dies. Her mate Garth finds that the boy has no antigens, hence no value, but he does have a tracking device embedded in him and only 8 hours to live. Violet finds out the antigens in Six's blood are actually deadly to humans. Six is then captured by the baddies. We all following? Because I'm not.
Look, I just watched it. I'm still confused.
I'm so confused. After some epic fight scenes, Daxus reveals that the Archministry intends to engineer a new plague to maintain its power. Totally missed that. Violet escapes with Six and lets him spend his last moments at a playground in the most bizarre scene I've ever watched. Daxus arrives, shoots Violet, and takes Six's body for dissection. Violet is revived and storms the Archministry. She kills Daxus and leaves with Six's body. Six wakes up having been... oh, God, I can never say this. Is it immunized or immunized? No, that's
you said the same thing twice.
Immunized? Immunized.
You can say it. You just did it. You nailed it like 4 times.
This is the moral of the story is never doubt yourself. Having been immunized and revitalized by the hemophage virus in Violet's tears. That's it? I don't get it either, guys. I'm confused.
There's so much to this movie. Like, this movie feels like a 9-hour limited series cut into 90 minutes. It's like a 3-book fantasy series that has been adapted to screen, but it's not based on anything.
You get so distracted by the fight scenes and the aesthetics that I struggle to hear what's happening in the plot.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was what every critic also said, and that it was incomprehensible. Like, that was definitely the most common feedback that the film got.
Imagine you make a movie and everyone's just like, I literally don't understand it. I can't even critically rate it. It doesn't mean anything.
Every single person. But if you love aesthetics like Shane does, great film.
Here's the thing, because also in early 2006, I was very enamored with anime.
Yeah.
And this has a very clearly huge influences from anime. And it was the first time I'd seen someone adapt them into live action in the way they did. Because The Matrix does it, but The Matrix is a little different. The Matrix almost invented its own grammar, which I thought was very, very cool. Obviously, they're influenced by other things, but like that anime aesthetic of, when villains are talking through their plots of evil, you're not showing their faces, you show their feet, you show their hands, you show their things, and that's like all over some Insidious synth score. Those kind of choices, which I really like in anime, or like taking a single moment and then just stretching it out as people have a stare down. And I did get a bit in this one. There's one sequence where it's on the top of the rooftop with the sort of Yakuza type.
Oh my
guys.
God, that was like my favorite scene. I watched that scene twice. Like after it was over, I called my partner Claude over, and I was like, "You have to watch this scene."
They're fighting the Blood Chinois, who are a nebulous Vietnamese triad-inspired sort of group. And then there's that one shot right as they're setting up the showdown where it tracks into her her face, and then her sunglasses become reflective, and it goes into the sunglasses, so you see the reflection of the guy she's facing, and it becomes a shot of him, and then it goes into his sunglasses to go back to the same shot of her, and then tracks past her to a handgun, which then gets fired and then goes back, and then you see it's following the bullet, and we see the reflection of the bullet is the guy, and it goes into the bullet reflection to just be a shot of him as he gets shot.
Sorry, can you say that again? I missed it.
The ending of that shot, this is what we mean when we say there were cool moments, because the ending of that shot, the idea of like a point of view and then it springs up and you see the glasses broken in half, that's cool. That's super anime. It's just the lead up to it is absurd.
It's so long. It's like a full maybe a minute and a half of just these different shots tracking. Like at one point it goes into her ear and comes out of a gun barrel.
Yes.
Like that was one of the transitions.
Yes. But that's also the scene where I wrote down, like, this isn't I don't think this is actually a movie. I think this is a completely different art form that we're just not prepared for and was just like shoved into the shape of a movie.
I think my take ahead of its time. In 50 years, we'll look back at Ultraviolet and be like, that was just live action anime before we even knew it, man.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, like a better version of that is, have you seen Speed Racer, Abby?
I haven't seen Speed Racer.
I watched it years ago, and so like when I've seen the reappraisal of it and I understand it intellectually, but when I watched it, I just wasn't prepared for it.
Right, yeah. Most people weren't, which is why it kind of tanked. And it only came out about 2 years after Ultraviolet. So, and they did a better version of, like, because they just go full tilt into it, whereas Ultraviolet still tries to ground itself at points, which is when it, like, it just feels really messy. And I also think the biggest crime of Ultraviolet is that there is a complete lack of levity.
It really thinks that it's very cool and very dramatic.
And I think if it had just been a little bit more owning up to the silliness, it could almost be like a good film, not like a great film, not a fantastic masterpiece or anything, but it could be like a good, dumb fun film, something like, The Mummy or something like that. Although I think The Mummy is, the Brendan Fraser one.
I love The Mummy. Yeah. The Mummy is immaculate. Here's something that you need to know about me, Mr. Shane Anderson. Okay, so when I was about like 8 years old, I was so obsessed with The Mummy that I made my own like sequel book called The Mummy Is Back. And I hand drew it and hand wrote it. And it was about Rick and Evie. Basically, I just ripped off the plot of The Mummy and retold it. But at the end, when they can't escape the mummies, Rick throws Evie at the mummies and they rip her apart. And at the end, my novel ended with, and Rick never thought about her again because she was a nerdy bookworm and he hated her. The end.
You murdered Rachel Weisz.
I know.
You murdered Rachel Weisz.
I don't understand, because when I look back at it now, I'm like, Evie was probably one of my first screen crushes because she was a librarian. So what's wrong with me?
I am a librarian.
Yeah.
Because as hot as Brendan Fraser is in that movie, Rachel Weisz is just perfection.
She really is. I know what you're thinking. What's a place like this doing in a girl like... Fuck, I fucked it up.
No, you nailed it. You totally nailed it.
What's a place like me doing in a girl like this? Great film.
Yeah,
The Mummy is... You can't fault it. But...
there's dumb fun action movies, and then there's like bad action movies, and like I can't think of an example off the top of my head right now, but I used to think Ultraviolet was a dumb fun one, and it's a dumb, like a bad fun one as opposed to a dumb fun one.
Yeah,
because there's still like enjoyable things in it and occasional sparks of, oh, that's all right.
It's lacking self-awareness for sure, because I mean, you guys are, I think both of you are very knowledgeable on Ultraviolet, obviously, and I feel like if you, Shane, were lurking in the IMDb sections of Ultraviolet in the forums and in the trivia, you probably know a lot about the production of this and what actually happened and why it is the movie that it is. Because I did some brief research today and found out quite quickly.
Not quite. Or if I did, I don't remember as much now. I was more enamored with my own opinion.
your own tale.
Yeah,
of
that's
what
right.
it
You were
was.
14. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. Other people and information, no. My opinion, that's the only facts I need.
My own dream world. That's a very teenage thing to do. No, when I was looking into it, I basically found that the film was meant to be 2 hours long and far more emotional, and it was essentially a better cut. It was like there was quite a decent cut of
Yeah.
it, but Sony was keen for it to be a PG film, and the cut that they made got an R rating.
So-
So Sony locked the director out of the edit room and just recut it
Yeah.
to be more of an action blockbustery
Look,
kind of film.
I've long been a proponent of release the Vimmer cut, you know? Like, give me Kurt's cut.
Yeah, give me Kurt's cut. I mean, apparently there was a cut that came out later, but it only had 6 extra minutes, so it wasn't even the original 2-hour film. It's a 94-minute long version, and some people say even this extra 6 minutes made it better. So apparently Mila and Kurt, the director and the lead, have both disowned the film because the cut is not what they envisioned for the film, not what they signed off on the film, and it completely altered the film entirely. Yeah,
Which desperately makes me want to know, like, is what's cut out things that are adding any sort of context or emotion to her character, or letting us in for even just a second in what the fuck is going on? Or
I have a theory.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, I suspect it's, you know, those where the movie will just stop for about 90 seconds to have a suddenly very emotional moment
Yeah.
that just plays wholly false because it's so sudden.
Yeah.
I reckon it's more fleshed out versions of that, or in getting in and out of those sequences. I think they got to keep the action scenes because clearly that's where all the money went.
I reckon
they're the
William
only things was
Fichtner
like-
was in the longer cut more because
Oh, Garth.
yeah, he actually did
Yeah.
a pretty decent
I
job.
quite liked him
And-
and their scenes together.
Yeah, and there's kind of a lot going on there that I feel like we're not a part of.
Well, the thing is, when you think about the film, it starts off with this incredible long action sequence of her going into to grab the weapon and
Yeah.
finding it's a boy, and that whole
The
sequence
boogie
of,
board with a baby in it.
it does an uncut gems where you get
And
half
it's a
an hour.
backpack, don't forget that.
Yeah.
It's also a backpack.
It's like the uncut gems thing where you get half an hour in and you realize you haven't had a breather because
Yeah.
nothing has paused. She's gone through the effort of getting the weapon and escaping from them, and as soon as she opens it and finds it's a boy, we're like 25-30 minutes deep, and you're like, fuck, now we're getting to like the actual meat of the story and what's happening. But it takes a long time to get there. So before that, I feel like maybe if there was a longer cut, we might have had some breathing room in that first act, or we had more in the later part of the film so it didn't feel so bloated at the beginning. Like, the structure of it just feels really off because I think we're missing that, like, the integral bits later in the film.
I do know that because in some of the behind the scenes there was them shooting like a big lineup of people with like the hemophages with like the red armband on them, like lining up to go in somewhere that wasn't in the film. So I feel like there was a lot more of the exposition dump at the opening that was also cut out.
Really?
Good.
Perhaps
Because that's
For the better.
exactly what I was about to say, though, is that, like, the way it's cut down means that there's this ongoing, like, genocide allegory for the hemophages, but I don't understand anywhere close to enough about the hemophages for it not to feel like a really weird and not great choice to make it such a heavy-handed genocide allegory. Like,
right.
well, just as the hemophages, I always miss that they die within 12 years. But even with that in mind, I don't fundamentally, like, I know it's a disease, but it's a disease that just, why are they suddenly being hunted? Why are they now evil and hate humans? Why are they treated as a different species? What the fuck is going on?
In the behind the scenes, the costume designer who... Look, this is very jumping down on a cliche, but I got the very big impression that the costume designer was family. He was a flaming homosexual, and he said, "Oh, I really appreciated how he's made this movie about a disease of the blood that's passed through blood that people being hunted down for." I was like, "Oh, I didn't think of it like an AIDS allegory, but it works."
Yeah, but But that's also what I mean.
Terribly inelegant.
Yeah, it works as an AIDS allegory in the sense that a blood plague where people were mistreated for having it scans. Does it make sense any more than that in the context of what happens in the movie? No, not at all.
No.
I think Ultraviolet is obviously so iconic for its fight scenes, right? Because when I first watched it a few years ago, I always remembered the quite infamous motorcycle chase scene, which is I think the best part of the entire film. They really peaked
with the
30 minutes
boxy helicopters, the two, the Lara Croft Tomb Raider helicopters chasing after.
And her, what do they call it? Like gravity render or something?
Yes.
Gravity leveler.
Yeah.
Gravity leveler so that she can ride sideways on the buildings.
I actually really dig that.
Yeah.
To the point where I am writing a sci-fi feature that's sort of a version of gravity technology that's being used, but hopefully it's better than this. Because she uses it for that sequence. Never again. At no point does she use the gravity leveler ever again.
Twice, but it's both at the start. She uses it on the building.
Both in the same fight sequence.
In the yellow and black
she uses
room
it to get out.
With no edges. It's just like a weird coloured circular room.
Yeah.
Yeah, she uses it in to get out of the building and then on the bike to get away from the helicopters to ride on the side of a building.
We see her put it down so that the generic European vampire can just have it.
The hunky, long-haired one in the white clothes.
With the scraggly beard.
Yeah.
That guy.
That looked a bit shit.
I really liked the gravity leveler belt because every time she'd use it, the actual graphics that they'd use to demonstrate that it was working is like this little planet exploding. And I was like, I'm watching Cosmos at the moment. This is very reminiscent of...
But that's the thing. I feel like the movie was doing that as if to say, you get it.
Yeah, it's gravity.
Yeah.
Just abstract images to demonstrate a very technical scientific change in the laws of gravity around her. I adore the gravity scenes, but that whole bike chase scene, the best bit is when she's just driving up the side of that building, and he really just takes a moment to increase the suspension of it, I guess, or the tension, because she's going up the building and you can see she's really focused, and the bike soars up and then just slams down on the top of the building in the most bizarre way. It's like this thunk, and that's when she sees the helicopter. And the helicopter is basically just floating between two buildings, and they're like, shit, when they see her. They start firing bullets. She starts revving her motorcycle up. She blasts through the helicopter and just guns them all down inside of the helicopter on her motorbike, and then crashes into a building, shattering through the windows. It's beyond anything I've ever seen. It's the best filmmaking I have simply ever seen.
And every time a new piece of tech is brought out, there's always someone to just say out loud what it is to another character in the room. And there's always flat space technology, rare stuff.
Yeah.
A gravity leveler. What is this? Just every time a new piece of tech is brought out, someone is there to explain it out loud to the air.
Which, if anything, I actually kind of appreciate. Give me something.
I love, because in that opening sequence, there's that team of 5 guys that are storming a building and they get gunned down by basically some of the military.
Yeah.
And a guy walks up and he's like, my God, it's a dimension so-and-so. It's just gibberish. It's like it's a dimension.
Flat space technology.
Yeah, that's right. And I was like, we're 1 minute and 30 seconds in and I've already got nonsense gibberish thrown at me. I love this.
But wait, what if they fake Oscar Isaacs was like, but wait, what if they were here to infect the blood? And I'm like, what the fuck does this mean?
I know what you mean about fake Oscar Isaacs, but I thought he was more... Who's the lead in Numbers? That was also...
I think
from
it was
the guy,
2.
I've got a dick on my face from 10 Things I Hate About You.
Yes, I was about to say from 10 Things I Hate About You. That guy. I thought he was a knockoff dick on my face guy.
Sure.
I never thought I'd say those words in succession.
For me, the bit that actually... Because I felt myself in the beginning being like, oh man, I forgot how insane this movie was. And then the rooftop scene, I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'm actually kind of just underappreciating it. And then it reached a point where she's coming back to save Six, the little clone boy, from the other vampires. And they're in a room that has a well and a giant clock, which means I have no idea where it is. It's also completely black. There's no lights in it. But
just a
then,
well and a clock. I think they're inside of like a church clock thing,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
why is a well in there too?
Exactly.
And can I please point out, when you're seeing the seconds tick on the big clock, the little second hand is going between the seconds. So it's like there's like 3 seconds within each second on the clock.
it's not actually
bizarre.
in line.
It's not at all. It's the way it's ticking is completely out of order.
But like the bit where she's realizing that that the boy's tied up, and if the vampire lets go, he'll fall down the well. And like she's realizing, oh, he'll let go of him if I try and do anything. And then the boy gives her a look and then intentionally flips off his shoe. And then her eyes look at the clock hand moving. And you, the audience, go, oh, the boy is saying, time how long it takes for my shoe to hit the floor so you'll know how much time you have to save me.
Was?
Yeah.
I
And then they
didn't
do
get
that.
it.
I loved that. I actually really liked that. I thought there's a better version of that. Because like, why would they know that? Like, why would they read non-verbal signals to each other that she's known him for 3 hours?
Yeah.
But I think in like if you put that moment in like a buddy cop movie and had like a decent setup to it, that would be a really cool moment. you know?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's a really interesting idea because then she also pulls out her like really big flat sword and they have this interesting fight scene.
I loved the flat swords.
The sword. I love the sword.
I think they're really
Yes,
cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love how she's pulling them out of the bracelets too
Yeah.
with the flat space technology.
Yeah.
So this is like all of these are cool ideas. It's just I need the listeners to understand that the actual scene that you then watch, complete nonsense.
Yeah.
Devoid of any meaning or comprehension.
But that's the thing, like this director has set up a really very distinct visual world because even though we watched this a couple years ago, Ultraviolet sticks with you because it's so aesthetically distinct. Like you can really see what the film looks like in your head. You don't forget it. So we set up a really
Have
good
you guys
visual
seen
world.
Equilibrium?
I haven't. I know of it because I know that Kurt Wimmer made it.
Yeah,
but-
it's the same thing, except another piece of ridiculousness. He invented gun kata, which is like a gun martial art thing. So that's his shtick,
which has always been a complaint. Because no, he didn't. He is not the first person to come up with martial arts and shooting things at the same time.
He put a name on it though.
Correct,
and
correct.
That's smart.
I was going to say his shtick is like brutalist architecture in sci-fi, as opposed to like shiny, floaty ships and things like that. The same martial art, I believe, is when she's got the guns with the blades coming down the bottom of them, which seem like wildly dangerous things to use for yourself because there's no way you don't cut yourself on those.
Well, she's also frequently, I guess, as part of her martial artist expression, pointing at and shooting nothing. She's just often shooting in the nebulous forward, and then guys will come out and emerge into the line of fire as she happens to point in those directions.
I was going to say really quickly, he set up a really distinct visual world. But the problem is, as per every piece of feedback and criticism that reviewers left, the plot is we're unable to understand the plot fully and what actually is happening between her and the government and the resistance members as well. And that's literally like the crux of the problem with this film, because even though you're enjoying these moments, you're still like, I actually don't know what the fuck's going on.
Yeah.
And like, even if it could almost get away with its visual flaws, because the CGI in this film is insane. Like, it's so poorly rendered. And there's a reason for that, by the way. There's a reason that the CGI
With one
scenes are terrible.
exception,
Tell
when
me.
the guys are rolling in on the bowls in the opening and then they transform from the ball to a human, no idea why. But I looked at that and I was like, oh, I bought that. Like, that looked pretty good.
Although-
and then everything else is from that point onwards is terrible.
But why are they balls? Because also the balls look like it's in a bowling rink. You know when like the balls go through that machine in a bowling rink, the bowling balls get fed back to you. It looked like they were coming off of those. So I was like, oh, I didn't know this started at a fucking kingpin. Like, that's crazy. It's an odd visual choice.
The one last thing that I definitely want to bring up, because it's in this discussion about like how it's intentionally like being a heightened reality that doesn't need to make sense. There is the moment she wants to like abandon sex because Garth has said like, hey, you know, he has the antigen that'll kill all humans and he's trackable. We got to ditch him. And she's like, I guess I'll do that. But it's not really explained. And she sort of leaves him, and then she's walking away being all emotional. But every single other person in this shopping complex is heading the other direction and like rudely bumping into her so much. And she's getting more emotional and putting on her glasses and starting to cry. And then she gets knocked over, and we hear a voiceover say, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And she comes to the realization, I gotta save him. So she heads back, and instantly everyone is heading the other direction equally as much.
For people who haven't seen the film, it's like, you know, in Inception when they start to make the projections aware, and so everyone deliberately starts hitting. It's like 500 times worse than that.
Yeah. That's a great reference for it. Like,
and the voiceover too. The voiceover is like it's like present tense voiceover as opposed to the bookends of the film, which is past tense. Sort of, she's narrating after the events of the movie, and then we just have this one instance plopped in there of active present tense voiceover that never comes back again.
Which I also like understood. That's what she was thinking. Like, that's implicit in what I was seeing on screen.
What am I doing?
Yeah.
Something that I kept thinking about was the fact that the whole backstory is that she also had a terminated pregnancy that was forced upon her because she became a hemophage, and like they basically like forced her to miscarry. And then I think they're making these vague allusions to how she protects Six because she's lost a baby. Like, that's meant to be a whole thing. But like it's never carried through properly at all.
No.
Like the vague allusion to the fact that she was meant to be a mum and now she has a child to take care of, I think is also the emotional thing that the director was trying to get at throughout the film. But I'm pretty sure that's probably also what got cut. Was like the whole backstory of like her being a pregnant mother and trying to take care of a child. But it doesn't work because you just don't care about their relationship with each other. It's just such a shallow relationship that they have, and you don't understand why they care about each other. It's just wild.
Like her first move is to try and stick him with a needle and take his blood. So. One other thing, because you brought it up very briefly, but I just want to emphasize the turn to Act 3, so from the end of Act 2 to end of Act 3, which is just a hard cut to Millie Jovovich and this boy on a merry-go-round. Crying.
Yes. That scene is incredible.
So absurd. Yeah. I didn't know that happened. I forgot that happened, and I was just watching it. I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it's like weird POV shots of both of them, of her looking at him and him looking at her, and you're like, is this a dream or is it actually happening?
It's played like a flashback, and then it's not. It's just then the people find her and they kidnap the boy. Sorry, the boy just drops dead.
Yeah.
And then they just shoot her. But first there's someone who is filming her crying over the body, which goes viral so that it changes the entire world's opinion on hemophages in one fell swoop. And then she, because she cried on him, that turned him into a vampire.
Yeah.
And it's just one drop that happened to slip right into his tear duct.
Yeah.
I, in that scene, didn't need to see Mila Jovovich in her whole, like, anime leather superhero aesthetic, like, crouched on one of those spinny wheelie things at a playground going,
Absolute fever dream. Absolute fever dream.
There was... as far as things that are good go, though, there was one line I really dug where it's the face down with the final guy with the things up his nose. Yeah. And
they look like tea strainers, by the way. They look like two little tea strainers jammed up his nostrils.
Which it's nonsense. He opens his mouth all the time.
Yeah.
But it's that line where he's just like, I'm going to take you down or whatever. And he's like, I'm unarmed. And she goes, not yet, you're not.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good one.
I was like, that's a good line. I like that one.
I think that some of the dialogue in this film was absolutely inspired. Like also that bit, there's that tender moment, and it's a bizarre scene where Garth has brought her back to life after she's shot in the strange fever dream playground. He brings her back to life, and she's like, why would you revitalize me? Like, why would you bring me back? And he's like, you know why. And then it cuts to a scene of them in a different location later at night. And then they speak two lines to each other where he's like, why won't you let me in? And she's like, because all of the good moments, as beautiful as they are, become evil when they pass. And I was like, what the fuck? And that's it. That's the end of the scene. She just leaves.
We're meant to believe in like one line that that he's in love with her or something like that. It's so
We never got that. I never got that from him, to be honest. He just seemed really friendly and professional with her.
The entire of Act 3 was so nonsensical. Like, I could make sense of Act 1 and 2 in terms of like an anime style thing where there's some ridiculous plots, but Act 3 just goes off the rails, starting with the hard cut to a merry-go-round, a playground crying thing.
And you totally said at the beginning, you were like, I realized that the fight scenes didn't really like escalate. They were kind of like the same thing again and again. And it's true in that there's that bit where she gets to the hallway after she's killed dozens of men just by randomly shooting into the air and happening.
They're all wearing like glass costumes.
Yeah. And like she gets to this hallway and they all like line up for her and she's just like, you're all gonna die. And then you see Daxus with the boy 6 in a different room and you just hear the gunshots. So you know she's so skilled you don't even have to watch her fight through people anymore. You just hear it in the distance. And I was like, what a cop-out. Like, it's just getting easier and easier.
Or the shootout in the dark when Daxus is, like, facing down the other vampires and they just do a whole shootout in the dark.
Yeah, 100%. I was like, did you just run out of budget that day? Were you just like, fuck it, like, I can't actually be bothered to get the actual...
You mean then when we see the bad vampires lined up like the Backstreet Boys and then Daxus drinks the most full cup of coffee I've ever seen in my life?
It's brimming. It's absolutely brimming. Do you guys want to hear a bit of trivia?
Yes, please.
Hell yeah.
IMDb trivia.
Here's a couple of interesting things I found in the IMDb trivia section, which I feel like you're both potentially also still familiar with. While on the set, Kurt Wimmer asked Mila to punch him in order to get a feel for the intensity she was putting into her action sequences. For the next several days, he directed the film with a black eye. And I love that because what a fucking wallop he must have gotten.
Yeah. I kind of like that about Mila Jovovich, someone who I'm really shocked has not made an appearance on this list yet.
I also read, like, this is another piece of trivia, but Kurt Wimmer wrote the script with Mila in mind as the lead character. She's such like a sci-fi lead actress. Like, I mean, The Fifth Element really solidified that, obviously. And also she was in Resident Evil, wasn't she? She played Alice.
She's
Yep.
she's the Resident Evil.
Yeah, exactly.
She plays Alice Evil, right?
She's such a well-respected sci-fi lead, but I feel like I also think that she's quite well-respected though, and I actually feel like we may never encounter her again in this list.
I don't think she's a bad actress. I'm never quite sure of why she makes certain career choices.
I just don't know why you're anti-Miller. You know what I mean? Like, I felt this brewing this whole episode. Did you feel that, Shane? Like, why do you hate her?
Yeah.
That's
You
me.
just hate women being successful.
Yeah,
clearly.
famously.
This is something that I touched on earlier, by the way. So in terms of the visual effects, the film's extensive visual effects are visibly unfinished in the final cut of the film. They were never completed as intended due to executive meddling. Sony had locked the director and Mila out of the editing room and hastily cobbled together an 88-minute film out of his R-rated work print, which I mentioned earlier. Several scenes, including the infamous motorcycle chase scene, use incomplete temp renders that were never meant to be seen outside of the editing room. The unfinished effects were a result of Sony trying to rush the film to release it on time.
Holy shit.
Man, I'll get back to it in my review, but I'm turning more and more pro this movie.
I feel like it got a bad rap because of Sony trying to push it out as quickly as that.
Fuck
It
Screen
could have
Gems.
been a literally just subpar or decent film, not an absolute visual atrocity.
Right. Well, now that they're temp, and so that makes a whole lot of sense, actually.
It really does.
Like temp is not even like half done visual effects. That's like the let's put in some box models so you get an idea, and we'll do them from scratch later.
I, on the latest feature I've been editing on, have been doing a lot of temp effects, and like, I'm not a VFX artist. If those stayed in the final movie, everyone would go, this movie's really bad.
Yeah. For temp renders, they were potentially quite good. Like,
Yeah.
So the courier in the film, Elizabeth P. Watkins. So you know at the beginning when she breaks into the military base to get the weapon and the real courier turns up? So that woman was actually the stunt double for Mila, which makes sense because when she says her line, I thought it was the worst delivered line in the entire film, where she's like, it couldn't have been me, you son of a bitch. And they've like got her arms behind her back. And I was like, wow.
And it's so ADR.
Yeah. Aggressively.
I also found this fascinating. So Kurt Wimmer, a comic book fan, decided to do the opening credits as a montage of Ultraviolet comic books since he had always wanted to make a comic book movie. Ultraviolet itself is not a comic book property. And I think that's absolutely bizarre.
At one point in that opening, I wrote it down, you see the text on one of these fake comics says, "Catch the amazing Japanum action." Whoops.
This film was so badly received and such a disaster. Because, by the way, I think the budget was 30 million and it made 31 million.
Oof.
So, yeah.
I think it was higher than that.
Oh, was it?
I feel like I remember reading that it was somewhere in 60 million, but keep going and I'll have a check.
Double check that for me. Fact check this. But because it was such a disaster, Kurt Wimmer didn't make another movie for years until 2020 when he came out with Children of the Corn, which seems to be a prequel to the 1984 movie, but they still called it Children of the Corn.
I hate when they do that.
Me too.
They do it with horror franchises more than anything, where they're like, this is part of the same continuous universe, but it's also just
Like-
the exact same name of the first movie.
Predator is one of the worst. There's Predator, Predator 2,
Yeah.
Predators, The Predator, and now it's the Suicide Squad and Suicide Squad.
Oh, God.
It was $30 million.
There you go. But also, like, he didn't direct for 14 years because of what a disaster this film was. But he was on track to be quite a well-known director at the time.
And that's the thing, like, if we're reappraising this movie as, like, what it sounds like his original vision was pre-Screen Gems' meddling, I would also, like, need a long time to emotionally recover. Like, this is a very comprehensive world. If I, like,
Yeah.
put my heart and soul into something like this and then the studio recut it by a full 30 minutes, and then everyone said this is one of the worst movies I've ever seen, I would never work again.
I'm always a bit disappointed when I find out that it's usually a bad film because of the producers meddling with it or executives meddling with it later, because I'm like, I just want it to be a bad film because of incompetent filmmakers, but now I feel sad for them.
Yeah.
And that's no fun.
Yeah.
Do you guys want some reviews?
I would love some reviews.
Yes.
So, I haven't burped. I haven't burped at all yet.
No, but you've slurped.
Yeah, I'm merging from burping to slurping. That's my new phase in
It's
life.
just so much harder to
Burping, the
edit.
slurping, and then there's the murping, which will happen later.
Yeah, that'll be the next. So this 50 will be slurping. Then the next 50 will be murping, which we have yet to decide on what that will physically be.
In 2022, there'll be a news report that'll be like, it's called Merping, and the kids will love it.
It's like black and white footage of kids in there. Oh, fuck it, I don't know. Leave me alone.
Reviews!
On Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an 8% approval rating. The site's critical consensus reads, an incomprehensible and forgettable sci-fi thriller, Ultraviolet is inept in every regard. This is a review left by Rob Nelson of Village Voice. The most receptive audience will mainly be enlightened to know that you can make a movie as thoroughly unprofessional as this one and still get it released in 3,000 theaters. Solid burn. I love it when critics are just really spiteful.
Yeah.
I really like a little bit of twang in my reviews. This is a review left by J.R. Jones for the Chicago Reader, saying, despite the expository speeches draped over this like birthday bunting, the story remains largely incomprehensible. Again, incomprehensible is definitely a reoccurring word here. This is an IMDb review left by MindSci, and the subject of it is beautiful, ultra sexy Violet. This was left in 2010 and is a 10 out of 10 review. Where do I get my full-size Ultraviolet doll? Seriously, Mila in multiple color skin-tight leather vinyl? Wow, I'm glowing ultraviolet myself. The sexiest superheroine movie ever. And sci-fi action to boot. If you didn't like it, you're probably not a guy. Or not a guy with testosterone. This story is no cheesier than Elektra. That's a callback to our 8th film on this list. Frankly, it's super sexy to see super sexy Mila massacre so many grunts. Vimmer scores big, as he does again with Law-Abiding Citizen. And yes, the special effects were pretty good for 2006. Watch it on Blu-ray. Where's my ultraviolet doll? 10 out of 10. Mindsai, you're an absolute creep, but I'm glad you enjoyed it so thoroughly. The reason I chose these reviews is that this is what most reviews were like. And I don't know what your review was like, Shane. I'm dying to know. It probably wasn't along the lines of Mila was really hot and I wanted to fuck her, but...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably definitely not.
Probably not. You were like, but Daxus, the tea strain is in his nose. He can fuck me up any day. This is a review left by Alec Baldwin 666
What?
in 2006. The subject of it is a hot babe in tight clothing in an explosive special effects film. What could be better?
God.
This is what most of them are like. Everyone loves Mila. The presentation was visually a 10. The sci-fi concepts, very good. This was meant to be a comic book type of film. This was never made to be Gone with the Wind. This was over the top, but in a fun way. This feels like a slam poem or like just some kind of... It kept me watching with great use of color. Lots of twists and turns throughout. Some great chase scenes in the movie. Enough bullets to please the NRA. No animals were killed, which should please Peter. 10 out of 10. That's it.
A bit of both sides.
This guy covered all bases. He really thought about the ins and outs, the intricacies.
I love these reviews. Every episode, just pure gold.
Pure gold. I love people in IMDb. As you mentioned earlier, you were an IMDb obsessive, and I think I was as well. I think I spent 80% of my time online on IMDb looking up films, looking up trivia, looking up reviews. So I love that you were active. I want to know what your review of this film is, Shane.
Look.
And what you would rate it.
I own it on DVD. I have owned it since I bought it when I worked at the video store. I considered this one of my... It was on heavy rotation. Like, I saw this multiple times in a year. Like, now I'm going to bring it up. Probably never. Look, I might revisit it. Who knows? If I want to do like I find bad movies teach you a little bit. Like, there's nothing to be learned from The Room.
Yeah.
But a movie like this, which is cool ideas strung together with a bunch of missed opportunities, I think there's a whole lot more you can take from those things, because every man and his dog is referencing Scorsese and Tarantino and Spielberg, but not a lot of people are looking at some of these things and putting them together. And that's what, Tarantino and Scorsese and Spielberg did. They looked at the lesser loved films that they grew up on, and they reconstituted them into their art. Like, that's Tarantino's entire aesthetic, is that.
It's super true, by the way. Like, if you want to be a good filmmaker, you have to watch bad films and figure out what went wrong and also how they could be improved.
Yeah. It's usually the better inspiration is, oh, I like this thing, but I don't like this version of this thing. So how about I do my version of the thing? Because my version of this thing will have a unique aspect to it. And that's art is synthesis of the things you grew up on and who you are as a person. That's what art is. Now, what would I give it? I'd give it...
Yeah, that's what art is. What's your review?
If I was giving it a numerical value, I don't tend to do numerical values anymore. My Letterboxd, I stopped giving star ratings, and I just say whether I liked it or didn't. But the film on its own, probably a 4 out of 10. However, with the fact that the studio meddled as heavily as it did and deliberately put out boxy, unfinished visual effects, I'm bumping up to like a 5.5.
Yeah.
Because I reckon... Because I think what we're getting is the intent, and the execution is where it fails miserably. And there are a couple of, performances are a little bit dodgy, but there are great films with dodgy performances, and there are great films with some crappy lines of dialogue. I think the intent of it is better than the execution, and knowing that execution is heavily dependent on the studio meddling, maybe it's a little better than what it is. It's not a 7 or a 10 out of 10 as I thought it was. I think I rated it 10 out of 10 on my IMDb rating. I think I was a 10 out of 10 guy.
William Fichtner is hot as hell in this.
but I think it sits at like a 5 to a 5.5, somewhere between there.
What about you, Michelle?
If a 5 is a good year,
Yes.
which I do not like that movie
It's
at
awful.
all.
It's so average in every respect.
If 5 is a good year, I would never watch a good year again in my life. I would probably watch this at some point again in my life. So this is a 5.5.
I was literally thinking the same thing. When I was thinking about my review, I was thinking the same thing.
I'm glad you agree with our rating system, like our neutrality scale. I also, by the way, don't particularly like rankings and number reviews. I feel like we do them because they do them on IMDb. In a lot of ways, like this is the movie that kind of got me into bad movies.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, like over the last 10 years, as I realized my taste as a teenager was shitty and just kind of got interested in why these movies were bad, and then that morphed into my main vehicle of events for friends was look at this thing that's really bad that I've seen, and look at this thing that's really bad that I've seen, and that turned into a regular event called Let's Watch Bad Movies, and then now the podcast. Ultraviolet was always on the list because it's just so distinct. And that means it's art that left an impression on me. And how can I be that critical of it then?
Yes.
So this movie itself is a 1, right? It's incomprehensible. But if you peer through the void, there is a dimension, an alternate dimension where filmmaking is a completely different art form with different principles, where this is a 10. And there's also an alternate reality where Screen Gems didn't fuck up Kurt Wimmer's vision, where it's maybe a 6. How could you possibly rate this movie? It's not a movie.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say we gave Ra 1 a 7 for being fun gibberish.
Yeah.
I think this is a probably worse made, but more fun gibberish than Ra 1 was. So I want to be consistent, so I'm going to give it a 7.
Nice.
Even though I think it's both a 1 and a 10 at the same time.
Huge.
I'm coming back on this movie. This movie has so many things that I'm I've never seen another movie like this.
It's so true. I mean, in terms of my rating, I've expressed this a lot of times. For me, my rating isn't even about quality of film anymore. It's about watchability and how easily I was able to get through the entire viewing of it. But this film was so watchable. I enjoyed the entire thing. It didn't feel like I was physically pained. If anything, I would watch it again and invite friends to watch it. It's a great bad movie to watch. This is the kind of movie we started this podcast for.
Yeah.
I also think that it's so visually striking, and there's a lot of things that I like about the film. And yeah, it's very much in that Ra 1 realm of it's over the top and extravagant and fun, and you can watch it with friends. So for that, I'm going to give it... Look, Ra 1 was special to
I know.
me. I don't think I can give it the same rating as
And
Ra
if we're
1.
really honest, we rated it too high.
No. I'm going to give Ultraviolet, honestly, probably a 6.2 out of 10. That's where I'm
goodness.
at. Yeah, she's high.
This is your highest rated one after Ra 1.
Yeah, it
Yeah, I
is
think it
because
is.
it's so much fun. It's not about quality anymore. It's about how much I was able to tolerate the film.
If anything, it makes me wish that I rated Striptease higher, which I thought was similarly a lot of really cool ideas wrapped in a not great movie.
Yeah. Well, that was Ultraviolet with Shane Anderson. Thank you for joining us today, Shane.
Thank you guys so much for having me on. I'm such a huge fan of the podcast. You guys I listen to every week. It's my
Aw.
commute. It's my work podcast. I love it.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
you've been such a wonderful fan. I've always seen your name popping in and around everywhere.
There was a point where I would live message Michelle as I listened to the episode when I was at my really shitty job at Coles. And so I'd listen to it in the morning and I'd just live message Michelle on Instagram being like, oh, by the way, this, and by the way, this, and by the way, this, and by the way, this. I did want to scream out that it is actually Vincent D'Onofrio instead of Donofrio.
Damn it!
Because it's an Italian. That apostrophe after the D is an Italian thing.
Yeah, but
so it's
Italian Americans always get it wrong.
But no, I love this podcast so much. So thank you guys so much for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining.
And thank you for being a guest here. It's been really, really great to have you on the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Was there anything that you wanted to plug?
Ooh, I guess. Yeah, sure. I mean, my old podcast, The Mighty Motion Picture Rangers, is available on wherever you get it. It's finished and wrapped up. It's just basically like a movie discussion one, although we occasionally we have a really good episode where we got a woman who's studying like film festivals as part of her doctorate, and it's literally like one of the coolest things. I learned so much about film festivals just from doing that episode. So I highly recommend if you can find that one. I think it's just called Film Festivals with Dr. something or other. She was awesome. But so that's wherever you find it, and the logo looks like the Power Rangers logo. And then my feature film, Red Curtain Hell, it's available on vimeo.com/on-demand/Red Curtain Hell. And feel free, I think it'll still work. There's a code, Picture Rangers, just one word, that'll get you 20% off.
Oh, nice. I'm going to buy it.
So, oh, thank you. You feel free to share Michelle's copy of it if you want.
Yeah, you can don't worry, just download it from me. It's cool.
Is that like a torrent anywhere?
Just
Is
start
it on like
pirating
Pirate
my
Bay or?
Yeah, that's all my plugs.
So that was Ultraviolet. You can follow us on Twitter under Rate Descend Pod or on TikTok under Rating Descending, or you can send us an email at ratingdescending@gmail.com.
Or you can find us on our personal social media. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram under @michelle.stclair. And Shane?
You can find me at ShaneM_Anderson. I'm very active on Twitter.
Nice.
And I'm on Insta under Abigail J. Ward.
And also, don't forget to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It always helps, and it also helps my serotonin levels.
So that was Ultraviolet. What shall we be watching next week, Michelle?
Next week, we are watching XXX State of the Union.
All right.
There's more dumb action.
Sounds about right.
I think Ice Cube's in it.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Is he? Have you seen that?
Shane! Why didn't you do the research?
How do
I haven't
you not
seen any
know?
of the XXX. They're on my list, but I haven't seen them
I
yet.
haven't either.
Well, I know there's at least, I assume this is the third one, right?
I have no idea. You're going to have to do
I
your
think
research.
it's the one where they ditched whoever was the original XXX guy, and then he came in for one movie, and then they did a fourth XXX movie where they brought. It's not Vin Diesel.
No, that one
I
would be
thought it was-
Quadruple X. That's what I'm saying. This is the third one.
I thought it was Vin Diesel. I don't know. I
Oh yeah,
remember
well then
putting-
he did like 1 and 2, and then I think 3 they replaced him with someone, and then 4 they brought back Vin Diesel.
We're going to have to use like 10% of this for the outro.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Well, see, bye.
See, fuck off forever. Fuck off.
Hate ending the episode.